Welcome, family. Welcome, 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 welcome indeed. MQT 48. That's right. That's right. That's right. How y'all doing? Rocking my Batakari today. Big shout out to my brother, Mr. Peter Adakwa. Oh man. How y'all doing? A very good Monday to y'all. How has your week started? I hope well. And actually, let me try to see how my background is looking. Yeah, I didn't set up my shit properly, you know. I had my brother's satellite, DJ Satellite, over, and at the crib today we spent a good time, good afternoon together, and yeah. Should have lit up my my candles in the back, which I actually am gonna do. Give me 1 minute. You know, let me do this right. Let me do this right. Let me do this right. Let's do this live and direct. Yes. Now we're talking. Even though I got a bit of a, you know, mixer in the background, but it's okay. Well, all right, family. So please don't think I'm showing guns today, even though I am showing guns. It's the big guns talk today. We're about to talk about Afro House History. Wow. Man, so much to speak on, and at the same time, not enough time to really touch on the topic the way it should be. But you know, it's okay. I think we will have time to yeah, get deep enough. Papa Keisha, comment ça va, comment ça va, comment ça va depuis Ibiza? Ouais. That's what I'm talking about, good vibes. You know, it was the princess. Daddy duties. We like that, we like that, we like the inspiration. That's what is required. Family, make sure you press those like buttons right before we get into the topic. Make sure you get those likes all the way up. You know, we need to see them up. We need to see them all the way up. You know, that helps the algorithm, you know, give quite the visibility to the show. And also, yeah, feel free to jump in and, you know, comment and, you know, interact, and, you know, also feel free to subscribe if you haven't done that just yet. And I'm not seeing, it's interesting. Let me see, yeah, here we go. Yeah, feel free to comment, feel free to ask questions, intervene, whatever you feel like, you know, sharing in the chat. This is not a monologue, it's an interaction. With that being said, allow me to start this show by merci Papa Keisha. Oh la la, that's what I'm talking about. The video, you know, it looks good on the TV. Huh? Thanks. All right, so I want to start the show by first of all saying that, for those of you who may ask yourselves, if you don't know who I am, why am I talking on this topic? Because not everyone may know who I am, even though I have a strong idea that if you do click on this channel, you might be acquainted. But if not, I'm one of the forefathers of the new Afro House, so-called Afro House sound, as in the sound that has been going on for the past 20 something years now. And I believe I have the authority to speak on the topic and give my reading of what that history is, looking at different phases, which I have noted here on this piece of paper. Because first and foremost, before I even start talking about the history, I need to debunk a little bit some of the things that have been said about Afro House. And the narrative nowadays, because there's a lot of new journalists, established journalists that have decided to just go for the clicks. They're speaking factual things in their reviews, but they're lacking quite a lot of intellectual honesty as far as how they talk about Afro House and who they refer to as being, the key players of the sound. That's not because I look at myself as a key player of the sound, because I am one of them, but also because so many are being dismissed just because there are new guys who have, bloomed and evolved to become more remarkable. Or maybe not, some of them not necessarily always new. Some of them, are from the same time I came up with, but they are the main talk and conversation. And I think that ultimately, that's great, but one has to remember that, this whole movement cannot have been made by just one person only. It's impossible. It doesn't exist, and it needs to be clarified. And obviously, there is this narrative that's going on right now, which is a bit weird to me. Which only pushes and speaks on one specific area of the continent, that is, South Africa, which has done quite a lot for house music. And we cannot take that away from South Africa. South Africans have managed to make their country the most important place for house music in general, right? So that can never be taken away. House, deep house, etc. Afro House, in that particular matter, however, has never really been predominant in South Africa. It has been there, it has been always part of the culture because, it's drums-oriented music, right? But it's not, it's always been more of a deep house and a soulful house kind of industry and that obviously, in my personal lecture and observation and participation to that history, because you see, this is the thing, people tend to forget at a certain point, even though it's not the case now, but at a certain point, when I started, my sound influenced massively the industry in SA at a certain point, early 2000s. And so, and big shout out to Oshunlade, actually, it was through the song Bria's Offering that he had released on Yoruba Records that, that compilation was The Soul Heaven. Him and DJ Spen mixed two CDs. DJ Spen, I think, mixed CD 1 and Oshunlade mixed the CD 2. And the opening track for the CD 2 was my song, Bria's Offering. So that CD at the time really, took over. And then there was a remix I did for Abika Soul, Baila Mi Gente, which also was a massive tune in South Africa. And so these were very important times because it was Manu, Frank Roger, Charisma, yours truly, Boddhi Satva, Rocco, of course, Rodamal, Manu, Rocco, Francois A. Who else? Man, obviously Ralph Garma, and we cannot Forget Rob Gum, even though his sound was more and has always been more soulful, but always incorporating the sounds, the Afrocentric rhythms, etc. I would say that much as Afrotech is predominant now in the game, in the industry, and globally, it's taking over, and everybody's really embracing the sound, and that's amazing. I mean, big shout out to the likes of Coffee or Jeff, Vanko, and many others, and some of the bigger names as well who have embraced the sound. That is really encouraging for the industry, for the sound and the culture. But the problem is that Afrotech, which is the sound that they are playing predominantly, is part of Afro House, right? So it's like you have house music, then you have deep house, soulful house, tech house, etc. You understand? There's different genres within the genre. Just like you have spiritual Afro deep, whatever. People come with different names, But to not confuse, we keep it Afro House. But here, I just want to be a little bit more refined with the kind of understanding we have of what it means and how the story is being told and reformatted to match, in my personal opinion, a certain narrative, which I wish to fight with the most vigor, because you see, the story is always told by the ones who seem to be in control of the narrative. That's because somebody like myself and others never really decided to step in the conversation, right? Either by lack of opportunities or by just lack of realizing that we actually could voice ourselves and speak the truth instead of saying it behind closed doors or within a small group of people. Well, here I have an opportunity. I have this medium. I have this platform that I can use to actually give a different perspective. And I always try to keep in mind the importance to always bring things as accurately as possible to the table, to avoid any confusion and to avoid any sort of criticism that can lead to, even though there's always going to be people saying something, and that's okay. I'm not here to try to please anybody, but to really be as accurate and as consistent with information I'm bringing as possible. And so the reason for today's show is really all about, giving you guys a bit of perspective and context as to what Afro House history is to me. So, and talking about that, just today a friend of mine sent me an article written on this website called, I think, Grey Zone. Somebody wrote an article about Afro House and speaking about just how South Africa this, South Africa that. Yeah, well, let's be clear. Within the realm of Afrotech, yes. Within the realm of deep house, yes. Within the realm of house music, yes. South Africa definitely dominates the genre. So much so that they've taken, because and I can actually even tell you the moment when that shit changed and who was one of the key players in making that change happen. In my personal opinion, one of these players was at the time, but still is, a guy called Pulo the Song. Pulo the Song, when he came in the game, he came with something that was not done the way he did it. And he's a guy that came way after us, but he inspired himself from the shit that we were doing and added his own twist to it. He added this cinematic feel to his music. And so when he was first signed to Inner Visions, which is a very important label in Germany, big shout out to Dixon and the whole crew, that set a precedent and really introduced Black Coffee, his label, Solistic Music, to which at the time Pulo the Song was signed to, and they gave the license of Pulo's music to innovations, and that really, in my personal opinion, was the trigger point, because the Berlin sound and these big DJs and producers, somebody like Dixon, for example, in that particular case, embraced that sound, embraced that musical identity, and co-signed it. That was the trigger point. Because if you listen back to, for example, and that's just talking about South Africa here, and I'm going to go back to the chronological aspect, but I thought it was important to just add an element of history here, just regarding Afrotech. But don't worry, I'll deconfuse you if you are to be confused. If you listen back to, for example, Black Coffee's music when it started, it was very soulful, but there was always this element to the music, but it was very, very soulful. When he started with his band Shana, the group that he had, and then went solo, like there was really this strong sense of melodies, and he's always been a guy that was into melodies. I remember even when I was visiting his house back many years ago, during one of my trips to SA, him and Zlikazi wa Africa had booked me for his homebrewed album release. You could already tell, like, Coffee really also had that very, distinct sound, and the way he was approaching the melodies and the arrangements was very unique as well. But he came at it from I would say very similar to me in the sense of the melodies and more musical, I would say. But the minimalistic approach came along the way, because obviously it's club music, so you're creating versions, and obviously the sound evolves, right? So you're not going to be stuck to one specific identity. Then you start creating formats that eventually will be touching the dance floors worldwide, as the formats gets to evolve. But I just wanted to add this element, because I think it is important. It is important just to bring context. So, I've identified about 8 phases in the growth of and the expansion of Afro House, right? The origins, the influences. Sorry. And so this is the thing. I think phase 1, if we're looking at phase 1, let me just look at some dates here. Just want to be very exact with this is the date I'm going to bring here. Let me see. I want to be very, very exact. Well, I believe that phase 1 is, and again, I'm obviously more than happy to receiving in your comments anyone who want to add names, etc. Septimus, Boddhi, big fan, love your collaboration with Nawa Marlins. Keep the Afro House alive. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Appreciate the support. Really appreciate it. Phase 1 is, in my opinion, it starts with the likes of Danny Tenaglia, Louis Vega, Joe Flacel, Jefte Guillaume, man, those guys. So this is early, well, mid 80s, I would say, where you had, mid 80s, mid late 80s, where you had this tribal house, tribal sounds, that go, all these different influences that was very, obscure, big kick drums, strong, housey vocals, spoken words, your typical late 80s, the beginning of the 90s kind of vibes. And so that's phase one. I think this guy's really paved the way, and to some extent, if you understand the evolution of house music, right, from its inception, it was obviously inspired by disco music, and then evolved into becoming house music. And I'm not going to talk on the history of house music because as much as I know of the history, I don't believe I'm the best qualified to speak on it. I believe some of the guests I will bring on the show at some point will be able to really speak on the topic with a much more valid authority than mine to speak on the house music topic. So referring back to Afro House, so when you have these African American producers, Southern American producers, or I would say producers coming from Puerto Rico, etc. You have the Latinos, you have the African Americans, with their different influences coming together. So you have influences from Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago, Puerto Rico, Cuba, etc. Especially with the presence of the Yoruba or the Ifa religion as well. That plays a role in valuing drums and having them as present as possible in the music, as being a conduit of energy, messages, healing, etc., etc., etc. So those people come with these influences from their background, their or their original countries, or just the place of birth of their parents, for example. Bringing these influences into the sounds, house music, that is called tribal, right? At the time evolved, I think, goes to phase two, where you have the likes of Alton Miller, Oshunlade, who else got, to a certain extent, I would say Carl Craig, all those guys, Theo Parrish, even though they're not doing Afro House per se, but because of the presence of the African elements in their music, I'm saying these are the sounds that incepted, what we would later on call Afro House. Those different influences. Frank Roger, Manu, as I said earlier, Mr. V, mixing the Afro-Latin vibes. We can't forget Africanism, Bob Sinclair, DJ Gregory. All of that is part of phase two, right? And then right after phase two gets explored, through this different rhythmical approach. One guy in particular comes and changes the whole game at that moment. And now we're talking, I would say, probably early 2000. So that's like literally early 2000. Oshunlade arrived in the game with a completely different approach to the sound, with a completely different approach to how you produce these records, and a very, very authentic, Afrocentric sound. Crazy. Like, this is now he's giving us an experience that far supersedes anything that we've seen before that. And not saying that anything that was done before him wasn't good, but it really brought a completely different element. The organicness of his sound was just so very unique, and the arrangements and the mixing, etc., the approach, crazy. That that inspired Around that time, you have the likes of Frank Roger with his label Real Tone Records, and obviously Louis Vega also had his own Afro Latin take um, that he had been exploring together with Skinny Dope as Masters at Work. But now with Vega Records, you have a little bit more of that presence, right? And so, Satellite Nakas, come here, bro. Yeah, man. Appreciate that, Septimus. Appreciate that, you know. And so, these second phase. So, time wise, we're looking at early 2000 until maybe well, it lasted for a little while. I would say at least 15 years. With obviously a bunch of producers coming and going. Some of these guys, stopping to do the sound, doing other things. And then early 2000, around that time, I was already doing hip hop. So I was involved into hip hop and all these things. Music was already something that I was into, but on a completely amateur level, nowhere near shape or form what I'm doing now on a professional level. But I am going to be, as soon as I discovered Shunade, so we're talking about 2002, I discovered Shunade, and it blows my mind. But before that, and I did on my previous show, I believe when I speak on the history of ancestral soul on MQT 47, I speak on that when I listen to that Alton Miller album Rhythm Exposed, and I get my mind gets blown away. Same happens when I listen to Oshunlade, and I come up with ancestral soul that becomes the thing when I released my first project with Oshunlade, my first solo project in 2000. Oh, it had to be 2000. Because I had done already 3 projects with Alton Miller prior to that. But my first solo project initiates the phase 3. Because obviously Manu, Rodamal, Fred Roger are right before me, right? I come right after them. Time-wise, we're looking at, even though I'm already producing music at the time, they're coming up. I'm still unknown, so I'm more like, a guy like that's just doing music. I still haven't released a song. I'm still working my skills. So yeah, I think 2006 maybe at the latest. It had to be around that time. That phase 3 corresponds with the arrival as well around the time when, I guess, it's a trickling effect. I ended up meeting, hearing about Rencido, but also, the guys from Heart Soul in Holland, which eventually booked me for their first parties, and we kind of like introducing the Afro House sound, but which was still very much connected with house music. And all of this comes from house music. Let's be very clear. Even though, it originates from Africa, but at the end of the day, let's keep it simple. House music bursts all of these different sounds. And we just have managed to add to that music, our own very unique identities, and completely transformed this music and making it ours, which is the whole point of creating. And so when you take that into consideration, so you have as phase 3, so now we're looking at that's around 2000, I would say 2008, 2007, 2008, something like that. You have the life of Rencido obviously coming up as well. Zephyr Saint. God, man, there's so many guys. I still remember, for example, anybody who knows Aluku Rebels, Jody. I remember Jody and his and the mother of his kids came to one of my shows in Paris. and I can't remember which one it is, if it was an ancestral night or if it was a Boddhi Satva party. I think it was a Boddhi Satva event. And he was also incepting his label, which, later would become what we all know it to be nowadays. So, we've really seen a lot of these things that you guys see now as predominantly as present and as dominating the game now. We've seen it. We've initiated the movement, So in 2007, I launched my label, Offering Recordings. Offering Recordings was a platform that, because I benefited when I came in the game, I arrived with such a fresh sound, because my addition and my take on the movement that was initiated by those pioneers I mentioned earlier, the Danny Tenaglias, the Louis Vega, the Kenny Dope, the Joe Cosell, Jeff T. Guillaume, the Ron Trent, the Chez Damiers, all those guys. Even though they would be identified as deep house, for me, they inspired these sound, Arthur Miller and so on and so forth. So my addition to the sound was, the use and the way I was programming the snare drums, and also my use of percussions, as well as the big sound that I had. So I had this very Central African take to the sound, which was not done before like that, right? So they would use the kind of syncopation I would use, but they would not move the snares a certain way. And by the way, I need to give credits to Frank Roger, for whom by the time I had done the remix, I sent him the remix. And bear in mind, I'm still up and coming. I just had one release with Arthur Miller, with whom had granted me the opportunity to do a song with him, So, and Frank is like, your snares are too straight. And it's like, move them a little bit behind. I'd never heard of that. So imagine, I draw knowledge from a guy who's a French Algerian guy, very respected producer, excellent at what he does, telling me how to program my snares. Now, obviously I went, after I learned that moving my snare drum back a little bit would give a completely different swing to the music. Now my whole mind is blown. I'm like, oh shit. So not only you can move that, but then you can move the shakers, then you can move the cowbells. It's amazing. Now your whole paradigm changed. And I started diving deeper into learning about traditional African sounds and influences and and researching and, just trying to emulate what I was hearing, etc., etc., etc. So when I'm bringing this influence of mine into the sound in Afro House, the likes of Rancido, obviously, Zephyr Saint, whom, by the way, is not a newcomer. Zephyr Saint is a producer, first of all, who has been producing music in the reggae, dancehall industry and R&B as well. Worked with Shaggy, so many artists. So when he came, and that's another thing about Afro House attracted already from a very, very early beginning, people from the so-called urban sound, the guys who were behind R&B songs. A lot of these producers were attracted to Afro House, which, we cannot forget one of the pioneers as well is Ian Friday. Ian Friday was very pivotal in bringing also the sound in New York, because Ian Friday, with his Tea Party label, he had a label called Tea Party, and his event together with Manshot Black, was a pivotal event in bringing forth the sound, in New York, etc., etc. Right? I still remember around that time how we would blend together already, the tech sounds with the Afro House sound already then, as well as the house music and the deep house, because all of these work together. It just depended on your knowledge on how to build the night and a set, right? But already back then, I remember the likes of D-Tron, D-Tron was a guy that does more techno sound, or deep tech, or whatever you want to call it. That was the kind of bridges we were creating between the sonic identities, without them ever clashing. And so, circling back to the phase three, the guys of the phase three, and you have to understand, through all those phases, it doesn't mean that we appeared all of a sudden. No, a lot of us were already working on our crafts. And as I said, phase one, Danny Teneglia, Louis Vega, Joe Placella, etc., all those big names, were inspiring the phase two guys, the Shuna Days, the Alton Millers, even though they came around the same time. They were almost all of the same generation, but they just had different, phases of presence in the industry and of penetration of the market, and also introduction of their sound into the music industry. So, looking at the evolution, phase three being the phase where myself, Francino, and so on, we bring now a completely different approach. Now we're bringing in again inspired by Oshunlade, who because you see, you have to, this is one thing that is very important, you have to bring back the essence where it belongs, right? Oshunlade was one of the first guys to introduce us to, in the Afro House realm, even though at the time it's never really been called Afro House per se. Oshunlade's sound was referred to as the Yoruba Soul music, which is the name Yoruba Records of his label, and Yoruba Soul his remixes. That's how we referred to his music before. I didn't quite refer to it as, as how do you call this? As Afro House, right? I don't really think that name was much of a thing back then, But Global Soul, for example, was a thing. And so, anyways, with that being said, you have a guy like Oshunlade who started doing remixes of. Thank you very much, Insuk. Thank you very much for subscribing to the channel. I appreciate your presence and trust. He remixes Ciara's Promise. Ciara, big R&B singer, and Promise is one of the remixes that he's done. It's like an edit, bootleg, whatever that he plays during his sets. That amongst many others. You see Septimus? That's right. Yoruba Soul remixes got you into Afro House. That's exactly what it is. Because it was a perfect bridge between anybody who would listen to other things to enter the Afro House. And I'll give you some other secrets as we go into this conversation. And I remember absolutely to the very moment I was on the dance floor with my brother from another, Abel Tabu. And I'll tell you the story, and I'll tell you why I'm referring to Abel Tabu here. We were on the dance floor at the June in Paris. Oshunlade plays one of his most amazing sets, as usual, dropping all these amazing, unique records. Like, you've got to understand, drums that you've never heard, those bata drums from Cuba, mixed with the with all these African influences, but yet you had all these massive, B-7 chords and all these crazy, lush and soulful sounds. Then he drops that fucking Ciara. We looked at the drums were mad, man. And he drops that shit on us. I've just thinking about it, I have goosebumps. It's one of those records where you're just like, no way. And that planted a seed in me. So I became very passionate about remixing now. And at that point I was like, oh, this is our entry point to the mainstream, to the R&B guys. Because you gotta understand, my ambition at the time, and still is today, was to work with the guys like, with guys like Didi and Ciara and this and that and the other. So, I was like, what is gonna be my entry point? What is gonna be the thing that's gonna allow me and everyone else who was doing this thing to really be noticed by these guys? Because, not only do we have the skills, but we definitely have an originality in terms of sounds that would not do them any harm and if anything, would benefit them. You know, so at that moment, shit, we start doing the remixes, the R&B remixes, we start doing remixes of popular songs, no matter the genre, flipping them into our own stuff. Me with Ancestral Soul, Rancido will do his thing. Rancido was doing crazy edits, crazy remixes as well. And so, what the reference to Abel Tabu is because with Abel Tabu, I initiated a take on the song that was now even more so Afrocentric in the sense of we incorporated the more folkloric and Central African pop sound into Afro House with our song called Mwana ya Mokili, Child of the World, Children of the World, in other words, being that. That song, that particular record here, with the guitar, the Congolese guitar, the way it was programmed, the way it was played, was a true tribute to Congolese and Central African music in general that had not been done in the genre at the time, the way we did it. So you have to understand, it was really like a moment of a lot of experimentation. That's still phase 3, right? So we're talking about 2005, 2006. 2006, I go to Mali, West Africa. My father, at the time, was living in Mali together with my mom, and brings back a CD with music, from Mangala Kamara, Baseku Kuyate, etc., etc. And I'm just like, wow, this music blows me the hell away. And I'm like, no, come on. And I'm automatically hearing the drums and the things that I can add to the music. This is how I'm gonna start. I'm gonna create these remixes of Umu Sangare's Andia, which was a fire starter for me, but also for Afro House, because it really now, much as Oshunade, brought the change in the industry that it brought. Now, I would say that that third phase was established by me through the way I added the sounds that I was doing to the West African and the Central African music. That caught the attention of Louis Vega. Louis Vega, you've got to understand, that's like, for those who don't know who Louis Vega is, not compare, but David Guetta refers to Louis Vega as one of his inspirations. That's like, him and Kenny Dope, those are the Miles Davises and, the Thelonious Monk of our music. Big shout out to Mr. V and Louis Gorbea for facilitating the introduction to Louis Vega and permitting me to eventually introduce my son and get signed to him. That gave us an additional level of mature and co-sign that the culture needed, the Afro House culture needed, because you've got to understand Louis Vega is house music, house, deep house, Latin house, not Afro necessarily. But around the same time, his wife, Anani, is also passionate about the sound, and she's just thinking about, she had done some singing on some of the records, but she's passionate about also, producing and releasing music on her own label. So she launches Nulu Music, and so we meet around that time, and all of that was really, 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 divinely placed, because everything worked out perfectly well. And in favor of this, of establishing even more of that presence. And so what I did, the moment I got in with Louis, what I did was just, started to call my guys, the Rancidos, the this, the that, and I said, yo, boom, 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 boom. Come on, guys, let's enter now. And from this point, you have the right, you at the same time, in Angola, you have those two guys who are coming up to our attention, before we get to introduced to all the other amazing talents of Angola. But two guys coming to the attention of the scene in the US, which are, Jeff and Sylvie with Tambuleno. And interestingly enough, you have also two other guys, another Angolan guy and a Mozambican brother, Nunes. What's the name of the crew again? Oh, just had the name now in the tip of my tongue. Shit. The name of it. How can I forget? What was the name of the AM Roots? Exactly. AM Roots. Exactly. Big shout out to those brothers. So contemporary to them, they're obviously older than Jeff and CDV, but around that same time, those guys living in America, obviously at the time, they're having a release with Nulu, and simultaneously, Anane signs that Tambuleno record of Jeff and CDV. Boom! That's another massive hit in the face. What the fuck is this? Right? So you gotta understand, these guys brought a different kind of sound that we were like, damn, Angola? Because until then, I didn't know Angola was into this kind of music. All this time, we're looking at South Africa. But little do we understand or we realize that, no. Angola has already been in that sound with Kuduro. And we have actually in the chest there, one of the fathers of Kuduro, DJ Satellite, who, alongside, a few others at the time, produced records for those big Kuduro artists like Bruno M, Nagrelia, etc., all these legends, right? So this is really interesting, and so simultaneously, but at the same time, it's like little 2-3 years differences around the same. Anyways, all of these things are starting to come up, and you can and now looking back it up, well, it's amazing how sounds were traveling. And so, in early 2000s, my son entered South Africa through Shula Day, and then around that time, the guys of Mix FM, the Alves brothers, introduced my music in Angola, and as they introduced my music in Angola, it becomes an influence. Little did I know that Jeff and Sylvie were looking up to the sounds that we were producing, and little did they know how much Tambuleno has impacted us as well. So it's like, oh shit! Now you're realizing that shit. I'm inspiring you, but y'all are inspiring us back, and it's just this crazy, interesting, amazing vibes. And this is still phase 3. Within that phase 3. In the UK, there's one guy that comes, and that's the legendary, the one and only Zephyrin Scent. Zephyrin comes in and brings that. I still remember him and what's the name? Nathan Adams. That track is called Circles, I think. Am I not wrong? Is that it? I think so. I remember to this day, he sent me an email. I think it was a promo submission for Offering, and he said 2 tracks. And I was like, so me, I don't know who this man is. I just see it now. I'm like, cool, music is amazing. I wanted, and at the time I wanted to sign it on Offering. And remember, Offering Recordings, my label, was leading pretty much charts, on Traxsource, etc. with Afro House, because we were already, signing a lot of guys, music. We had, obviously, Jeff, CBV, Black Soul, Kulu the Song. Legends like Rage Dokes, who's not Afro House, but who embraced the sound. We had who did we had? We had as well. So many artists. Lemon and Herb. I think we released Lemon and Herb's first project ever. And so at the time, we were very much dominating, or leading the game, because there was not, it was not such a thing just yet. And I say we because, even though I launched the label in 2007, around 2010-ish, Ivan Diaz came to Belgium and, helped me, co-manage the label. I mean, he actually managed the label as label manager before then passing on the ball to Sifa, and that's another story. But bottom line is that we were really leading the charts, with Da Capo, all these great artists. And so anybody who would sign or release records with us, it was really a big step of approval for major labels in South Africa, for example. Sony, Universal, you signed with Boddhi or da da da. It was like this thing where it was really launching careers, at least not launching careers. It was facilitating their entry point, and then they would do their thing. So, in no way, shape, or form am I taking away the hard work from them. But, offering recordings was a staple in the game at a certain point. And so, as this phase 3 is really, booming and doing its thing, phase 4, we start discovering the likes of DJ Malvado, big Angolan, DJ, producer, legend, who has different hats musically. He would produce a Simba album or Afro House album or whatnot, and he does it greatly. Knows how to surround himself with the right producers to do these records. And then we'll start discovering. But then again, let me remind you, all these guys are contemporary, if not even elders, because they're already playing that sound before. But it's just that they're entering the game at a much later point, But they're bringing different sounds now. And so around that phase 4, so we're looking at around 2011, maybe 2011, 2012. You have Maporisa, Uhuru, Professor, the whole Kalawa, Ishesme sound, which I have to say, Oskido was embraced a lot more than anyone Afro House. Oskido really embraced a lot more anyone than Afro House, at least according to my little knowledge. And Durban, with Black Soul and those guys. Also, you have Tira and all those big DJs. Afro House had some grounds there, Pretoria as well, I think, if I'm not wrong. But with for fact, I do know that Joe Berg. If we're talking about South Africa, but again, I haven't touched on the rest of the continent just yet. Alongside these different phases, you have the likes of Dorivaldo, that are coming up with the the Osbana guys, with the Manyoko and Pundu records. You have obviously Satellites, who have been doing things in the Kuduro world, but now starts, dwelling with Afro House. And so his name comes up, to our attention. And then all of these guys, and we're talking about the interesting time, the phases are really not so long in terms of time and separation. We're looking at a minimum of 3 to 6 years of that, and that's pretty amazing, between each phases. Some of them even closer. Morocco starts coming in the loop for the gigs, first and foremost, and rest in peace, Mehdi Damir. My prayers goes out to his family. He's died a couple of years ago now. This brother opened a club in Casablanca, the first club serving soulful and Afro house. Well, soulful and house music pretty much, but also some Afro, even though it was not predominantly the sound that they were playing. That was the first club dedicated to the sound in Morocco, in Casablanca. Bearing in mind that at the time, what was dominating was these very commercial sounds, EDM, So we're talking about 2009 now. That's about 2009, 2008, 2009, around the same time. So we have clubs that are opening, that are starting to dedicate themselves to the sounds, introducing, various producers and DJs from different kind of origins, influencing us locally, now the likes of, I still remember Mr. ID, DJ Aladdin, rest in peace. CL Assad, all those guys when they were coming up. I mean, it was really interesting. We could see the influences and the way they were realizing the potential of their own music being introduced to the world through Afro House, right? So, Fabio Gomez, what's going on? How you doing? So that whole phase four, is constituted by the birth also of the love for this sound in the heart of club owners, some club owners, some promoters. Around that same time, I am blessed to perform in Los Angeles with a massive legend, night promoter, DJ extraordinaire Marcus Wyatt, who runs at the time and still to this day Deep. The night is called Deep. I mean, crazy. I mean, we're talking about Marcus Wyatt at the Vanguard in Los Angeles, Hollywood, Deep. I mean, who doesn't want to play there? It's the get down. It's the place to be. It's the place where you as a DJ, that when you play Deep, it opens a lot of other doors. So boom, Marcus gives me a chance. I introduce people to the sound, additionally to what he was doing around that segment. It's crazy because also radio stations like independent, a guy like Lars Bernross, nobody can forget Lars Bernross' contribution, because Lars Bernross already had a massive take in South Africa through his Deeper Shades of House show, right? He was one of the early guys who podcasted. I don't know how many thousands of podcasts he has right now, but I think it's well in the over 3,000. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but at least 3,000 podcasts since he started. So this guy is like on some next level shit. And so you have all these different now people start gravitating around the sound within that phase four, because it's a very it's exciting. You can sense there is something, the likes of Gregor Salto with DJ Gregory, with the song together that came out on Defected. Obviously you have these influences that are now being integrated within the French connection. The likes of obviously Manu, who had already been doing his thing together with Rocco, but now it really is looking like, oh shit, guys, like, whom we never heard back of, in the game, Fabricio Ortega. Dope producer, man. Dope producer, this guy, man. God, there was so many guys that was doing great shit, Anto Vitale, our friend, Anto Vitale, crazy producer. Who else, man? It was a whole era. It was a whole era of guys and girls just doing their thing and really contributing to the sound. So that was very, 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 very amazing. Very interesting. So phase 5 happens, I think, we're looking at 2015, 2014, 2015. Maybe a little, I think around that time. Then you have, come to our attention the likes of DJ Brett, the likes of, Satellite, maybe you can add some names here around that time, but, you had a lot of producers there that came to our attention. DJ Telio, the guys of Bamboo Records, but they came a little bit afterwards to our attention. But, in Portugal, when the Angolans were really leading the whole thing, you had DJ Havaiana, Abias, that are still doing great things to this day. Still pushing fresh sounds, but they were really dominating and influencing the whole sound. And the Portuguese Afro House started to come to light. With Angolan, the Angolan diaspora of kids that were born of Angolan origins were born in Portugal, or the Cape Verdean kids of Cape Verdean origins were born in Portugal, bringing forth their influences, their own take on the sound, and creating, different sound and drum patterns, a little bit more banging, and that's up to a more recent time. So phase 5, I would say, was the DJ Brace, Havaiana, BS, etc. Then things started going a little bit faster, and since 2000, I would say 2016, since 2017, the sound has evolved dramatically and continuously. The reason why I'm giving you these phases, and I said earlier before I started identifying, so far we've had 8 phases of sonic refreshment, sonic revolution. And you rarely see that in any genre, really. You rarely do, where the sound evolves so much, so fast, and so efficiently, and creates subgenres every time, which is pretty amazing. A bit confusing at times, but still amazing. So, if I was to give an age to Afro House has about, is between 35 to 40 years old. If I am to include the influences, without the influences, the originators of the, as I mentioned earlier, phase 1, Ten Aglias, Joe Placel, the Louis Vega, Kenny Dopes, etc. But those forefathers, and I can't forget the techno guys as well, Carl Craig, Juan Atkins, Teal Parrish, man, all these guys, man, they brought their own influences and Africanness to the sounds, to techno, which again for me is very connected to Afro House. And as we will see, obviously, and as I'm coming to it, you'll see the obvious reason why. So 8 phases so far, 8 revolution. That's amazing. That's amazing and promising for the capacity of our industry to renew itself and to refresh itself. The dominance of South Africa, however, remains potent. The industry is very well structured. At a certain time, Angola could have really took over and become the world capital of Afro House, and they got their shit together and really not fucked around with all the money they had at a certain point. At a certain point, these guys had so much money, man. It was not even funny. When Angola was about to buy Portugal, literally, man, the producers, the DJs were literally swimming in pools of money. And they did nothing or very little of it, except spending it and doing fuck shit with it, when they could have built an industry. South Africans, on the other hand, managed to build for themselves an amazing, sustainable industry, very well structured. You have the media that goes with it, so you have tabloids that comes with it, an entire industry has been put in place, providing work for thousands and thousands of people, right? And it's been the case for a long fucking time. You have to understand that this came also at a price, right? This came at a price for all those guys. The Vinny Da Vinci's, the Christos, Oskidos, Greg Malaka, etc. All those guys really fought hard to bring forth to your attention one of the superstars that we have now, for example, Black Coffee, who, congratulations to him, had won a Grammy. I mean, you've got to understand how big this is for the music we're doing, even though, it may not seem for some as anything, um, it is seen as something special, but it may not be seen as something as impactful as it is. It is very impactful. It's very impactful in the sense that it has opened the door for our sound to integrate others and to enter including new realm, you know. Hey, shot, the vibrance of the community is important. Then again, the lack of leadership never helps. Exactly. And so, you know, going back to the recent revolutions that we've had, you know, circling back to Kofi, for example, with his rise to power, I would say, and to leadership of a certain sound, you know, where I have had issues with some of the lingos used by him or others regarding Afro House, because they've never really embraced Afro House. For them, they didn't want to be supposedly caught into Afro House per se. And at a certain point myself, I had not quite grasped the concept of Afro House, because I was a bit conflicted with how it was portrayed and put out there, right? Until I realized that no. This is our baby. We started this whole thing. We have got to push much harder and own it. Whereas a lot of people were very quick to say, no, I'm not Afro House. Because you know what? It had a connotation. Afro House always had, and to this day, you know, has a connotation of something, it's too black. Oh, it's too black. And me, in the game, I am considered to be one of the guys that plays too black, too African. I don't know what the fuck that's supposed to mean, but I know what it means. It's just not appealing to a crowd of people who spend the kind of money that can pay for the kind of fees some of these DJs are asking. Fair enough. Maybe you're right. At least at the time, you were probably right. Nowadays, with all these different industry being birthed and the different type of promoters, you know, coming to life, and the different type of public you have access to, that may be a very shifting sort of truth. But with that being said, you know, Afro was very much considered a bit of a taboo. So Afro tech makes sense, because obviously there's an integration of techno in the sound of African house music. But you've got to understand, we started Afrotech a long time ago. We were doing that, man, before it was even called Afrotech. And as I said earlier, one of the guys that really bridged and opened the gates was Kulu the Song, because of the way he was introduced to the industry of techno through Innovations, Dixon's label, right? And when Brother Kulo decided to release these music with them and release actually a couple of projects that was very successful, that, in my opinion, was a trigger point, allowing the cross-pollination of the sounds in a way, in a much broader way, right? So phase 6, sorry, excuse me. So phase 5, as I said earlier, you know, Breath, you know, DJ Jesus, Telio, etc., all those guys, great stuff. Phase 6, or 5.1 is the domination of Afrotech, right? So starting 2017, we're seeing this movement. We're seeing that, okay, there's something happening. The DJs, the so-called underground is no more underground, really. You're starting to see, you know, I remember, and you know, this is where people need to understand. everything is very, us humans, we are very visual, right? So, the moment we saw coffee, I remember it was very important. It was a very important thing for us even to value ourselves, because he is one of our guys, who is there in a helicopter going to a gig in Monaco. Like, this had never been seen before in our industry. Now, bear in mind, the guy is not claiming to be Afro, right? But because we originate, we believe that because obviously his sounds originates also in our sound of Afro House. We obviously integrated him and considered his success ours, just like any other guys who has, taken roots in Afro House and then evolved into doing their own things. Because that gave hope, that gave courage, that gave a sentiment that, okay, this is going somewhere. One of us is doing this. Let's not forget, because of South Africa being the nation that it is, a nation that embraces house music, that embraces their artists. South Africans are very jealous of their artists. They love their music, they love their people, and they'll support each other, which is amazing. But they won't necessarily support other countries necessarily in the continent, and that is the truth that has to be said. It's also something that plainly the advantage of having such remarkable producers and DJs take over the world, because when you have a whole nation behind you, it gives you so much wind and also a crazy amount of challenges, but you have a support that is really a remarkably massive support, which, if you're looking at Angola, for example, Angolans love their music, but they don't support each other the way they should. Like, there's just a lot of like shooting in each other's foot kind of situation going on, and it gets annoying as fuck. And that's one of the reasons why, again, separation and, being no unity brings to, the dissolution of any potential, solid thing to take place, because, you don't have all the elements together. The cement is not going to take, it's not going to bear anything solid. Whereas South Africans have this thing, they may not necessarily all like each other, whatever, but they'll support each other. They'll be there. Like, if one of them wins, it's all of them, and they're pushing, and they're, very much like the Nigerians. That's one of their strengths that I have to say is extremely remarkable, and from which we need to draw a lot of inspiration. But let's not forget, I'm a Central African brother, and I'm one of the guys who inspired their sound as well, the Afro House. So, it's a Central African brother. Some Angolan brothers are doing the same. So let's not forget our contributions. Raul K, Ivory Coast. Who else? Saint Ivo, Kenya. Okay, he drew inspiration from South Africa, but still, let's not forget how now the inspiration and all of these sounds and all of these eras are starting to, it's really becoming something. And there's a guy that, is, and again, it's important to pay homage and to give credits where they do. But one who has not been getting his flowers the way he should have, in my opinion, is Maphorisa. Maphorisa is one of the most Afro House guy that we may know. Because I remember, for the story, Maphorisa's first biggest hit was done together with me and Dinga Gaba. It was actually, the song was called Dinga. Big tune. At the time, nobody was spitting like these atalakus the way I did on the song. After that came all this era of guys like doing these like crazy things on the mic. They were not doing it the way we were doing it. Central Africans, this is the thing. It's not a matter of saying Central African and West African, no, but it's just history gets forgotten along the way if it's not told. So now I'm telling you how it's happened and how it's incepted a whole movement. So when Maporisa, had this big hit of his, which was also a big hit for us. I mean, that Dinga track for me in Angola was huge. Huge. Man, you have no idea. The thing that you don't understand, a lot of producers from Angola would travel to South Africa. DJs, mostly DJs, who didn't really have the production skills, would go to South Africa and get, guys like Maporisa, Cuba, and all these other folks to produce records for them. They would go back home to Angola, drop their singles, and do their things, right? And build reputation in the name of that. So there's always been a connection between the two countries. Well, not only in music, actually politically, maybe not so many people know that, but Jacob Zuma, former president of South Africa, used to live in Angola, right? So there is a lot. I mean, I don't want to go too deep because I love my history and I love to go deep into things and I can explain what is the connection between this and that. But bottom line is, within the phase 5, with the dominance of Afrotech, you have a guy that, completely on the side of things. Nobody's looking at him. He's literally in the dead angle of your mirror, of your rear mirror. And that's Maporisa. Working with Wizkid, crafting the sounds and hits for Wizkid, Davido, Burna Boy. Just to name those 3 guys. Some of the 3 biggest names now in the world coming from the African continent. This guy, Maporisa, has been a pivotal influence and reason for the hits. His music, the music that he's done for him, for those guys, respectively, help those guys build the name for themselves. And what was that music? Afro House. Afro House gave birth to Afrobeats. Better yet, Afro House gave birth to amapiano. Because amapiano, I remember when I went to South Africa in 2016, I was looking for a place where I was going to live. I was introduced to amapiano in Soweto. I went for a friend's bride in Soweto. And I heard this music and I was like, what is this sound? It was very interesting. It was this very slow tempo and it was just, piano sound or road sounds. There was not all this crazy, log drum stuff going on. And they're like, no, it's called amapiano. Oh, okay, cool, nice, man, nice. And they're like, but you'll see, it's not gonna last too long because, the likes of AKA and Casper Nyovest and all these guys were coming up, and hip hop, is dominating the game anyways nowadays in South Africa. But already back then, 2016, it was crazy. So amapiano was taken to the next level, in my personal opinion, by Maporisa and Kabza the Small, under the high influence of Maporisa, because of his understanding of how to turn sounds into commercially appealing product, right? So when Maporisa embraced amapiano, that was it. He took amapiano to the next level and really paved the way for all these other guys that came right after him, or probably around the same time, but just didn't have that inspiration that he had. Again, that's my reading of it. I might be wrong. I stand to be probably corrected or not. But for me, we have to distinguish very important elements within the phase 5, which is 2017. The amazing growth of coffee, and the sound, and having, now you have Alicia Keys, you have P. Diddy, you have Cassie, you have and oh shit, now everybody's getting excited. But at the same time, again, you have that phase 6, which is the Maporisa situation here. And that's where, I think lines get blurred and slightly, all purposely or not, but interestingly enough, you have, certain point, the history that's been forgotten about, you know, maybe because people don't know, because they don't want to know, because it's been read, I don't know. But nonetheless, it took, in my personal observation, Afro House guy, Maporisa from South Africa, to come deliver these kind of records, work together with the local producers, you know, like for me, one of the, you know, great producer, you know, Shizi, Davido's producer, who's done quite a lot of hits, that including Davido's hits with Chris Brown. You know, Shizi and I were connected because actually Maporisa introduced him to my sound, and and it's amazing to see how, without us knowing, all of us had an influence on one another. Because when you listen to the sound, you know, like Skelewu, for example, Davido Skelewu, you know, no, that was Whiskey. But Skelewu, I mean, this is amazing. If you're listening to these influences, you're like, yo, it's crazy. It sounds like Afro House, but it's not. But it is. That's the point. So, again, just because you've influenced or you inspired doesn't mean that, you know, you can claim ownership. No. But you can claim inspiration, and it is important to place back things in their order. And this is not an ideology, it is a fact. You can actually look at dates, which I don't have here because I haven't taken the time to write those dates, but I'm pretty sure my margin of mistake in these conversations are very, very, very small. Very, very small. So phase 5 and 6, you know, I would say you would have those two guys, Kofi, you know, Maporisa, and the Nigerian brothers, you know, Davido, Wizkid, Burna Boy, you know, who embraced the sound, who actually give us another sort of rich. But because Nigerians are so very strong with owning whatever they take, they quickly managed to add their flavor, which, I mean, you know, if you remember, there was what was it? Ghana, what was it? It was the Ghana, Ghana bounce, whatever. There was a Ghana sound, which now has, you know, I think there was Alzonto. Remember the Alzonto phase, right? There was a bit of a competition, but then Niger music just took over. In the meantime, what the Ghanaians managed to do, and all of these sounds are connected, but we would have to do another conversation, right? But if you're looking at the competition between Alzonto and Niger music, right, Afro beats, and let's also remember, why did they call it Afro beats? They added an S to make a slight difference between that and Afrobeat, the Fela, the King Seniade, the Tony Allens, etc., to say, okay, Afrobeat is the modern version of Afrobeat. Okay, cool. Which eventually turns into being Niger music, but I mean, anyways, Afrobeats. That's in Nigeria, that's how they understand it. However, if you go to the UK or some of these countries, for them, Afro House is Afrobeats. You understand? So from one country to another, the interpretation of the word is completely different. And so, and that's understandable, right? Because if you listen to it, yeah, it's Afrobeats, as in African beats, but it's cooler to say Afro and then beats. All right, cool. So Afro House benefits from that slight, error of interpretation and gets mixed with the Afrobeats, which allows us to kind of enter the radio world in some radio stations in the UK and around the world, right? By mistake, technically. But this goes to show you how much Afro House has been shitted on for many years. And still is to a certain extent today, because still to this day, now, if you listen, if people say, oh, you do Afro House, in their mind, it's not the Afro House you understand. If you actually know what the sound is, it's Afro Tech. Because Afro Tech has replaced Afro House. And if you do the actual Afro House as we know it, just like if you were to produce a proper house record or a deep house record, there's a significant difference. But if you're not educated about it, you won't notice it necessarily. So from that point on, if you do this Afro House original or supposedly authentic, although there's not so much of an authentic Afro House sound, I mean, there is, but there's no more because there's so many mixes and melange, which I actually love. And I'm one of the reasons why this shit is happening as well, because I've always had the pleasure to fuck shit up. I loved, doing things that was going against the grain. So I'm glad, inspired a whole new generation of producers to do their own thing and to say fuck the rules and let's create our own rules. And I think that's great. But the point is, we still gotta tell the history. We still gotta, again, put things back into their context and their order. So phase 5 and 6, I would say, as I said earlier, Coffee, Coffee, Maporisa. And that's 2017, as I said. 2017, you start to have as well around that time, Jeff. Jeff is really, Jeff from Angola, or back then known as Jeff Afrozilla, is established a name for himself, released a couple of dope records, and he's starting to really, step away from the rest, or stand out from the rest of the producers from Angola. Not saying that it's better, or that, no. It's just, it stands out because of the way he's positioning his branding. And you'll understand something here. That's phase 6 now. That's to show you how fast things have moved. But that's the thing. Whenever there's something that comes up that gets shone more light upon, it obviously takes away from seeing what is happening around the same time. And then boom, Angola is starting to stick out, but again, because there's different scenes, you have Jeff doing his thing and starting to become a little bit more, not mainstream, but a little bit more accessible to a wider audience within a certain realm. And then you have Satellite, who's also doing his thing, but from a more underground perspective, having, the likes of Red Bull Music Academy, all these different always having these different interesting features in magazines, bringing a more cultural, a much cultural aspect, traditional aspect, understanding of the music, and you would say completely opposite worlds, but actually not completely connected. But it's just that because, again, they evolve in different paradigms, it's hard to perceive it. If you're actually in it, you got to take a step back and observe and say, oh, okay, these are actually very connected. But anyways, all that to say, those different phases of Afro House and evolution happen around the same time, more or less 2 years margin. And then phase 8 is what I had what I was speaking on was actually phase 8, but I needed to give a bit of a inception story here, because the phase 8 was coming to life within phase 6 and 7. But it's just that it needed the impulsion of these two phases, the Afrotech and the Nigerian influence, to now, boom, give some sort of like fire to, or I wouldn't say better yet, I would say inspiration. Now, I would have to invite Maporisa or Tabs on the show to actually ask them their perspective and their experience of what I just said, but specifically about amapiano, what was the starting point of inspiration and what made it evolve to where it has come to nowadays. I mean, it's the most dominating sound worldwide. I mean, it's crazy. If mainstream America uses Afrobeat tracks on their TikToks, young girls and boys, you know that shit took over. And unfortunately, we have to take America as a reference, but yes, because that's where the money is. So Some might say, yeah, but amapiano is not Afro House. You want to, but okay. Of course, it's not Afro House necessarily, but it is still playable within an Afro House or deep house set without a problem. Hip hop set, if you want. But the reason why it has been made possible for the sounds to be played is because it came from something initially, and that something is Afro House. And I would go even as deep as saying that deep and soulful house were very important in influencing the different sonic approach of Afro House. But that's another conversation for another time. Yeah. So the movement, Afro House as a movement, as a sound, is 40 years old at least. Just looking at its inception in the early 90s, early 80s, sorry, early mid 80s, between 35 to 40 years old. That's quite a lot of years the sound has gathered, and there is amazing history you can trace back to. There's so much you can draw inspiration from those eras, and that can influence the future of the sound and continues to influence the future of the sound. I mean, now you have, the new generation guys who are like, I guess, it's still phase 8/phase 9. Fuck, I think we can actually go at phase 9 now because Shagwada, which is like a sound that Danny Gatto here in Portugal sort of created with the producers he's working with, is this very banging Afro House sound with very, very electronic and very big room, which is very interesting. And yeah, man, it keeps evolving. But leadership, as Keisha was saying, and we had a conversation together with Keisha many times, where, for example, him talking about the Zouk industry and the Kizomba industry, those industries, have a problem of, including Afro House in this particular case, have a memory issue, and it's almost like you want to kill your heroes, but you can't be doing that because, well, you can, but we won't let it happen. And at least I decided to step in the picture and claiming back, the position that is mine. I mean, I am one of the forefathers of the sound, and I know it sounds cocky to say this shit, but I don't really care because the bottom line is I've earned my stripes, and I don't necessarily need the validation of anyone when it comes to that, simply because I'm not coming here from a perspective of saying I am better than anyone or I'm doing this. No. Let's put things in their order and let's just give everyone their flowers because everyone deserves them. Now, do we need stars? And do we need people that will stick out more than others? Of course. And anybody who is not in accordance with that is silly. Because not everybody is meant to be a star. Not everybody is meant to be in the forefront, under the spotlights. It's not for everyone. Not everybody can be a leader. And there's different forms of leadership. But the bottom line is not to say, oh, I'm better, I'm this, I'm that. No. We are here to just set a very important precedent in telling the truth. I was there from the inception. So with all due respect, I've seen all the guys coming up. I've hooked up a lot of people. I've done this, and I will continue to do so, and I'm continuing to do so because that's just the way it works. The other day I was checking out this big American producer who wrote a message on his Instagram saying that he had done so many favors to rap artists, wave to some of his publishing deals, that really just gave a lot of things out of love and support, and that when it was time for him to ask favors back, nobody was there or very few responded, and that led him to decide not to do that anymore. And I was like, I understand the frustration, but as my brother Kay and I, Keisha and I, we spoke about literally yesterday again, referring back to, and I'm paraphrasing, but to the late, may he rest in peace, Jacob de Varieux. If you are in this, who said that if you are in this industry to get acknowledged and to be thanked for whatever contribution you've done in someone's career or in the industry, point blank, you're in the wrong business, you know. And you shouldn't be here, truthfully, to be getting any of these kind of, accolades, even though it's always nice. But you should always and never forget that this is a business, and you need to carry yourself as a business, considering, that whether we want it or not, once you're done creating the art, everything after that is just money, and it's trying to make sure that you can make it work for you and to your benefit. So yeah, I think I'm going to be using this conversation, sending that to a couple of people, journalists, that I think are honest enough. I'm going to ask a couple of other guys to step in and speak as well, add dates and stuff, and write a proper fucking article that trace back, because with all due respect, but that's just me. Now that's me personally saying, not only have we earned our flowers, and I'm not thinking you heard well. I didn't say I've earned. Alongside the others, I've earned my flowers, but we've earned our flowers, and we need to be given our flowers. And if we're not going to be given our flowers, it's okay. We're taking our flowers, we're putting them ourselves, because you know what? We know what we have done. Bottom line is, it's not about trying to catch, since everyone else is winning, and because we're beaten, we want to say, well, we started this whole thing. Because I know that narrative, which is very silly. The bottom line, it's not even about that. It's just about telling the story as it should be told, just from the beginning. And you don't have to be all long like I just was, but placing things back. Now, understand that. And I would have to find that article again, but that article is very interesting to me, because it's like the one that I read today. I was just like, oh, fuck, man. Everything is about South Africa, this, South Africa, that. Of course, South Africa has done a lot, but come on, what about Angola? What about Kenya? What about Senegal? What about Ivory Coast with Coupe de Calais? What about Angola with Kuduro? What about Kenya with El Cafe, with Blankets and Wine? And those big events that were doing big things back then, and really have launched the sound. What about Morocco with Chocolate Club of Mehdi Damir at Casablanca? What about Nigeria? I mean, what about all these different countries? That have, Botswana. People overlook Botswana. Do you know how if you think South Africans love their music, you gotta go to Botswana. I remember the first time I went to Botswana, I was with Ndinga Gaba, my brother. Big shout out to my brother Ndinga, out in Baltimore. Another Central African brother, by the way. We went to Botswana. Yo, the level of fans, they knew all of the goddamn sounds we were playing. There was not a song they didn't know. We thought we were playing, they're like, nah, we know this shit. They were singing along. They knew the melodies, they knew the breaks. South Africans as well. No, don't get me wrong. I remember House 22 in Pretoria. First gig. Black Coffee is there, Kulo the Song, Mzilikazi wa Africa, DJ Spilulu is there. Man, there was a couple of other dudes that were there, Yo, all of us. And at the time already, Coffee was doing very good already at the time. You could already tell that he was standing out, and Kulo was, playing right before me. No, I was playing before Kulo actually. So when I spun, I remember, man. I remember this guy Mopala. Oh man, this brother, man. Whoa, amazing energy, bro. Amazing. Oh man, it was just something, and it was unique. But again, let's not overlook all those who have done what they have done, because it is important to really give to everyone their flowers. Man, DJ Fresh, come on, nobody can forget the big dog DJ Fresh. Can't forget the likes of Greg Maloka from Kai FM, who's done a lot, you know, back then. Who else? Man, there's just so many people, so many people. I remember even in Sudan, I wasn't of that radio. I had a show there as well for about a year or so in Sudan. Oh, how can I forget the name of the radio? Anyways, man, let's not underestimate the power of our industry and the power of numbers. We may not have a nation behind us, but we have nations and niches within each nation that are willing to support the sound we do. But what needs to happen is that, just like anything, we need a historiography of this music. When I see documentaries produced by the likes of what's the name, the guys from Rise, I've seen different documentaries, only pushing one side of the thing, which I have nothing against the guys of Rise. I think they're doing a great job, and I think that big shout out to them. They've booked me before, they said, and they've shown love. But I think that the problem with documentaries and with this kind of things, everybody will tell the stories, and that's okay. But within you telling the stories, tell your stories right, and even though you might be the new kings now, don't forget that those who were there before you. Not saying that you need to absolutely do it, but let's not play the game of what the colonialism has done, which was making us forget of our greatness and those who have helped us before colonialism came about and fought shit over. Those who gave the letters of nobility to our forefathers. Just like we honor those who came before us in the game, we're gonna honor those who came after us. Because all the shit, the reason why, guys like myself, the Black Coffees, the Jeff, the Satellite, the K-Shot, all of us in our own industries, and actually, let me finish that sentence before I drop into that. All of us have paved the way, but we don't necessarily need to brag about it, because that's our duty, that's our role. We are here to build legacy way after we're gone, but it can't be built if there's no acknowledgement of the true history of things. I agree with you, Papa Kesha. I'm definitely going to be doing a series with the Afro House legends, and we will be doing that definitely, without a goddamn doubt. But talking about Kesha, for example, you said different scene. I remember to this day, MCM Africa. I was in Bria, Central African Republic. Kesha is 10 years older than me. I was listening to his music as a kid in Bria, and being amazed at this guy's shit, and I was like, whoa, I want to do that shit. To now call him a brother and somebody with whom not only I draw knowledge, but also share knowledge and work with. This is why you have got to understand, when you know your worth and you've worked hard to earn your stripes, you cannot feel any specific way but being humbled, because this is a God-given gift upon which you've worked, upon which you've dedicated time and energy. You understand? Fame should not be in any way, shape, or form something you should chase after. Be consistent with your work, but tell your story right and know your history. Study the people before you. The reason why, for example, in my industry, I have had the chance to sit at certain tables, share information and gain information from certain people at certain tables is because of the way I presented myself, always humbly and always respectfully, but never in a way that will allow my humility and my respect is not a pretext for anyone to come and sit on my head and shit on it. Never. These people were always in the presence of a king in the making. Because when you're a prince, you need to know your position. You need to know that when you're in the presence of kings, you sit down and you listen. You work, you prove yourself. Once you're worthy, they will tell you. There's so much history. I still remember to this day, but this is something I don't want to really say, but well, I'm going to say, when some of my biggest inspiration, people I dreamed to work with, eventually I ended up working with, and sit me down and say, you know, what we did in our days, you did that single-handedly with your industry, with the shit that you created. And after that, obviously, so many people have, but you've inspired a whole generation. And when this comes from your forefathers, you know, the pioneers of the South, wow, it's humbling. And me speaking about this is not me bragging about it. It's just me reminding myself of my mission. I'm not here just for me. I'm here for all of those and all of those who are trying to give up, and reminding them, look, don't fucking give up. And it's just my palala. Greetings. Don't fucking give up, because no matter how long it takes you, you will get there. You see this show, for example, that I'm doing? Had it not been for this pandemic, I would have never, and I tell you now, never done such a thing. But look, I developed a completely new set of opportunities. And this talk show on Mondays, my DJ show on Fridays, is now a real and serious thing that I do. Growing my channel exponentially, growing my visibility exponentially, and allowing me to tell the story, my story, my perception, my perspective, my take on topics that are valuable and important. And hopefully you can draw inspiration from and knowledge from. And again, yes, I know, when you say me this, me that, and I've done this, I've done that, a lot of people get pissed off. And you know what? I decided to no longer be shy and be ashamed of saying, yes, I did this, yes, I did that. And I will continue to do so from now on, because you know what? It is important. It is important because long enough have we stayed quiet and we've let people tell our story for us. No more. That's where leadership comes. That's when you actually embrace your hat, embrace your crown, and really behave as such, and really take on the leadership. That doesn't mean I'm XYZ's leader. No. I'm taking leadership over what I'm trying to convey and share. That's it. But I'm no leader of anyone who says, no. Everybody's their own chief. But let's just say that this conversation with you guys is and was and will continue to be utterly important, because history needs to be told right. Yes. Because there is no way we're gonna let our legacy be forgotten, because there's people who are trying to paint their own perspective and draw things from a narrative that is really, unfortunately, that will unfortunately make a lot of people disappear from the picture. And that would not be fair. Ignatius Mapalala, you telling us the truth shall set most of us free. Thank you. Yeah, man, I'm just trying. But with that being said, I've taken some of your time, and I'm glad that I was able to share with you, my reading and knowledge of the history of house music, which, I've taken direct part in, as you have probably made it by now, identifying 8 phases initially, but then up till recently, if this seems to sustain itself, at least here in Portugal, with the Shaguada, which is another form of Afro House, which is it's a vibe. Shaguada is not necessarily a sound, but it's a sound, but it's a sound and a vibe at the same time. But it's if that's confirming itself, and it seems to be, because if you play a set here and you don't play some Shaguada, you're not really playing a set, So yeah, it seems to be a thing, probably in the 9th phases. So yeah, sound is moving fast, and because of that, it is important to, along the way, set very important beacons of lights to help people remember where they come from. Very important. These words, family. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. Make sure that you continue showing the love as you watch the replays. Share this if you feel like it. Press those like buttons. I shall see you next Friday for Quarantine Grooves, another one. And I'm really wishing you all a beautiful week. May it be fruitful, may it be positive. And don't give up on yourselves. Keep on believing, If it was easy, we would have known about it. Probably, yeah. It's a long way. Oh shit, Elon Musk just bought Twitter. That's a fantastic news. I'm glad indeed. Yes. Elon Musk. These are the people we're going to be sitting next to, Papaki. That's the spaces we belong, and that's the places where we have a lot to bring to the table too, especially you. Have a vision, work for it, and don't let nobody tell you otherwise. Oh, you're not to this, you're not to this. Yes, of course, if you can enhance, and somebody tells you something that is an advice to help you recalibrate yourself and recalibrate your approach, you should take it. But anybody trying to discourage you, unless you're being stupid and silly, even then, who are we to judge that? Only you know. And only your determination would allow you to see through or not. As far as I'm concerned, yeah, we're keeping it moving. Always and forever, until, we are called back by the Creator. DJ Galio, what's going on? Guys. And yeah, talking about Galio and all these guys, man, part of this new generation, bringing the sound forward and taking things, further into, progress. I'm really glad I didn't give up back then. Many times I wanted to give up on this music because it was hard. Many times I starved because of this music. Many times I've cried and I've laughed because of this music. But it is this very music that took so much from me that gave me so much as well, man. The table I was able to sit at, the people that I've been able to encounter and call friends and family throughout the world would have not been made possible had it not been because of music. So you know what? I'm not turning my back to what has given me the joy and the challenges that allowed me to be where I am today and where I will be tomorrow. There's still a lot to do. So don't get comfortable. Blessings, family.